My name is Anna Giulione. I'm one of the clinical research nurses at Tom Baker Cancer Center. I work mainly with Dr. Bayless and Dr. Neary. However, I do work with our other hematologists as well. Okay, there I am. Okay. So basically, why do we do clinical trials? These are just some of our objectives today that I'm going to talk about. I always say this to all of our patients. I wish I could put you all on clinical trials, but that's not the way it works. Each pharmaceutical company or whoever is developing a clinical trial wants specific answers, wants specific patients, wants specific everything. So we just have to follow their guidelines. These are just the objectives. Oops. I'm not going to read them. There we go. So basically, why do we do clinical trials? We do them mainly to collect data regarding the safety and efficacy of a new drug development or of a current treatment that we have and how to make it better. There are several stages, several steps to approving a clinical trial. It could take actually almost 10 years from the idea of a trial to when it's finally out on the market. And I'll just go, okay. And it does begin with extensive laboratory research, so we call them our little nerds that are in the lab that have this concept, a great idea, and I don't want to call Dr. Bayless a nerd, but our scientists in the lab, they have such wonderful ideas. Dr. Neary as well has come up with great ideas, and then we bring the idea, or they do, to Health Canada, and then they make up this research, and we put patients on the clinical trials. And then of course we have the pharmaceutical companies that bring their drugs to us, and they want us to try it on our patients because they think it might be a better treatment for us, for you. I don't have myeloma, yeah. So this is actually the drug development process in Canada, just an idea of what we do. The drug, I don't have a pointer. Okay. Yeah. Okay, it's okay. Just a concept of, and I just mentioned it, how long it takes to get to the lifetime of a drug to get on the market. Is it on here? No. Okay. Okay. All right, so it could take many years. So Dr. Zepeda had talked about the different phases of our trials. The first one, the phase 1 trial, is when we just put a minimum amount of people on trial. So we maybe 20 or 30 people, and it's just to find out the efficacy, the safety of the dose that we should be giving. That's it? Yeah. Okay, there we go. I'm just gonna, how do I move forward now? Oh, here. Well, Ben, I found it, yep. So this, we focus on the safety and the proper dose. So we don't put a lot of patients on this trial. This is the one that I guess most of our patients are most frustrated with, because we usually can only put 3 on, because it's usually global. And so they'll say, okay, Tom Baker, you get 3 patients to put on the trial. And the eligibility for that one is a little harder to meet for our patients. For our newly diagnosed, for example, we have now a new CAR T-cell trial. But they only gave us 3 spots. And as you saw in the Myeloma Canada, there are 11 patients a day that are diagnosed with myeloma. So it's hard to say, okay, you can be on the trial and you can't. And so we go through the criteria and we see who's eligible and who we can put on trial. Once we figure out the proper dose, and I'll go back to daratumumab when we first started. So we started off with a small dose, and I'll just say an example of 100 milligrams. And does 100 milligrams work? And we have to use it on 20 people, wait a month, see what those side effects are, and then we move on to the next cycle and see, can we move on to 200? So this takes a very long time to get to the dose. So we did find that 1,800 milligrams or 1,800 milligrams was a safe dose to give subcutaneously. I'll go back to that one because that's the one I did. And so that's the dose that we now use. we used in cycle 2 and phase 2, phase 3, and now we've put it out on the market as the safe dose to give. But it took almost 10 years to get to finding out that that was a safe dose to give. Okay, this was my phase 1. Also, when we're in the phase 1, a lot of blood tests, a lot of ECGs, a lot of bone marrows. Everybody loves bone marrows, but that's what we need to do to see whether or not it's safe to give this drug. Okay. We are currently doing, I think, 6 phase 1 studies at Tom Baker, and it's all for bispecific antibodies. So what are we looking at when we're giving you these treatments? We're looking to see how the drug is absorbed in the body. So these are the phases that we're looking at. So we take your blood test at certain points. We'll do it before you take the drug, maybe an hour later, 8 hours, 24, 48, whatever's in the guidelines. And we're looking to see how the treatment, not always oral, how it's absorbed, how it's distributed in your body, how it is metabolized. So how is it broken down by your kidney, your liver, and how it's excreted. So we do a lot of different tests, and we're looking, that's where all the graphs come in. I don't do the graphs, Dr. Bayless does the graphs to tell you where, if your liver enzymes have gone up, for example, then we lower the dose, because that's part of the guidelines as well that we use. Then we move to phase 2. We found the dose that we think is good to give to the patient, which is safe. So now we're using it on, let's say, 100 people. And we want to see, is this a safe dose to give to everyone? Well, 80% of the time it isn't. So we have to go back to phase 1, find the right dose, and then come back to phase 2. And then we start over again, and we say, okay, now we think that 100 milligrams is a good dose, so we will start giving that to more and more people. And of course, it's more global. They may choose more sites to give patients the treatment. Again, we never know the side effects, so this is what we're looking for, and this is why we constantly ask the same questions every 4 weeks. How are you feeling? And are you eating? Are you vomiting? Or do you have diarrhea? Do you have diarrhea more than you had last time? Do you have a rash? Is your hair falling out? These are all very important things that we need to know, because we need to know these side effects, because we don't want, like Dr. Zepeda mentioned, a quality of life. We need that too. Yes, we want you to live longer, but we want you to have a fairly good life as well, not just being tired all the time or being on a toilet all the time. Phase 3, now we know the safety of the drug, the efficacy, and the effectiveness. So now we are giving it to more people. So when we have phase 3 trials, this is great, because this is open to most of our, or a lot of our patients. We still have the eligibility criteria to meet. And so we can give it to more people, which is great. However, these fill up very quickly, because now we don't have to ask. So they fill up. The pharma might say, we want 600 patients. Well, when we're in all of Canada or global, all the world, 600 fills up very quickly. So if a doctor is mentioning a clinical trial for you, seriously consider it. And if you don't want to do it, that's fine, because this is always voluntary when you want to participate. But I know that we've had patients that waited sometimes 2 months, and the trial already closed. Okay, and this is the same thing. Patients that, like, maybe some patients have no side effects, and then there are patients that have very different side effects that we don't expect. Those are the ones we call adverse events of special interest. We want to know those especially, because then we go back to the pharma company and we let them know what's going on, why would this happen, and they may ask, can you do extra blood test on that person, because we want to know if the patient is not absorbing that, or is there something else underlying, like do they have, I don't know, high blood pressure or something, the pill that they're taking for high blood pressure, is that affecting the drug that they're on? And we have done that, where we go back and forth, and we hold the drug, we don't give it, and we do different blood tests, and we see, and we call pharma, and I'm on the phone with them a lot. We have safety meetings, actually. That's important that you know. So every time, every 2 weeks, we have a safety meeting with each of the trials, especially when they're in the phase 1 study, the phase 1 portion, because they want to know what's going on. And if there is something that, so for example, if a patient dies, and sometimes it is because their myeloma is so advanced, we would stop trials sometimes, and we've done that, where we've stopped the trial and we analyze everybody and everything, and then if the pharma thinks that, or Health Canada gets involved too, thinks that it's safe to continue trial, then we continue. So your safety is always priority. When you're in the phase 3, this is sometimes when we need to know, does standard of care, like Dr. Bayless was talking about, the standard of care, is this better than the new treatment? So what they do is they put you, it's called a randomized or blinded clinical trial. So you would get your standard of care, let's say it's Velcade, lenalidomide, and Revlimid, versus the new daratumumab, lenalidomide, and dexamethasone. Which one is the better one to give? They call it randomized, so we don't know as the trial nurse. We give all the information, we send it to pharma, and then a computer spits out who gets what, A or B. When it says blinded, it doesn't mean, or placebo, does not mean that you don't get a drug. It's ethical not to give you a treatment. So you will get a standard treatment. The pills usually look the same as the other one. That's the treatment drug, just so that we know that you are getting something. So we did have a blinded test with the ixazomib when we were giving that drug. The pills were the same color as what they call the placebo, but you were still getting a lenalidomide. So you were not getting something. Okay. So yes, the control group is your standard of care, and your investigational group would be the other treatment arm. We have one now, a study that has 4 different treatment arms, because they want to see the standard of care and then 4 different other treatment plans. And then phase 4 is when it goes out into the market. Sometimes Health Canada has come back to us and asked us to do another study, because they want to see, do we really want to spend that much money? So they'll offer the medication as on compassionate grounds. They've done that for daratumumab. They're doing that now for elranatamab. And it's just to see, does it really work better than the standard of care? Because now we have to pay this much more. And so we regroup our people, and whoever needs a new treatment, then we propose this treatment. Does anybody have questions? No? Okay. So the components of the clinical trial. So we get the trial protocol, or the clinical trial. They send us our trial book. And in there are the guidelines of what we need to do. There's always an objective. What is the question? What are they looking for? A lot of times it is the overall survival. From the time you're in complete remission or very good partial remission to when you need the next treatment. So this is what they're measuring. Or they're measuring MRD, which is the minimal residual response, which I'm not going to get into because that's a whole new conference on its own. That one there, okay. Before I screen a patient, I have to get the informed consent. So the informed consent is a contract between this. So this is what your protocol description, that's just an example. Okay, they tell you what it is, whether it's a phase 1, phase 2, phase 1/2, phase 3, and that's the question. Okay, this is what they're looking at. Mm-hmm. The study design. These are for example, again, the different treatment arms that they have. The DVD is the new one. That's the one with daratumumab, Velcade, and dexamethasone. And the bottom one is the Velcade dexamethasone. Again, this is an old trial. Okay, the informed consent. This is where you get this lawyer-written contract, and it tells you what to expect during the clinical trial. So it's sometimes, like the one for CAR T-cell is over 100 pages, and it just explains mainly the side effects. You could get this. Of course, every side effect that you tell me, I have to tell pharma, and then they put it in this document for you to read. It's very, very long, but it just tells you what to expect. The PET scans, the bone marrows, the blood tests that you're going to have, whether or not you're going to be admitted to hospital for observation, because that's also one of the factors. And then some people read this and they say, no, I don't want to do it. I'd rather just do standard of care, which is fine, because you do have that option as well. A lot of times when I give the consent form and then, I don't know, 3 or 4 months down the line, and I say, okay, well, we have to do this, and oh, I don't remember that. Well, of course not, because it's 100 pages, and there's a lot in there to remember. But I'll remind you, yeah. Sorry? Okay, I didn't hear that. Probably a good thing, yeah. Okay, then comes the eligibility criteria. So they give us an inclusion and exclusion. And this can also be quite significant. So for the newly diagnosed, of course, you can't have any treatment before. The blood tests are important, so they'll say, for example, your hemoglobin has to be 80, your kidney function has to be greater than 30. They just give us the criteria, and that's because everybody has to be, the people that they're putting on the trial have to be very similar. So that's what they're looking for. Sometimes they'll ask for an age group. Sometimes they'll say they can't have more than 3 lines of treatment, 3 prior lines of treatment, which when you're in relapse, that limits the amount of people that can put on trial. And it differs from one phase to another. Sometimes the eligibility, especially when we get to phase 3, it's a little better. I can put more people on. But the phase 1, it's very specific. Some of them, in fact, when we were doing the one on venetoclax, the trial with venetoclax, they wanted a specific biomarker, the T1114. So that eliminated a lot of patients as well. Yeah, and the reason for this is the criteria also helps researchers understand who will benefit most from the new treatment. And then the treatment phase is from the beginning. So after you sign consent, this is when we start. This is when we start the treatment. So we do the screening workup, and we start the treatment, whatever it is. What's important, sometimes the trial gives a diary to the patient so that they write down the days that they take their, let's say, pomalidomide, did you have any side effects? Or the day after you had your injection, could you write down what you had? And then I take this diary and then put in the data so that everybody has their data for the pharma company, and then they can compare. Like, for example, daratumumab, we used to give it a lot faster. Now we've slowed it down a bit because it does give a big rash. It gives sometimes a big nodule because it's viscous to give the drug. So it was good to have this diary. And a lot of patients like to keep diaries to see what's going on. They like to know when they're having the nausea. Is it right after? Is it a day after? So they kind of plan their day when they can go out, because they know, I know 8 hours later I'm going to get diarrhea, so no, I can't come out with you tonight. Yeah. So it's very important for us to know these side effects. And we keep track of your blood, the kidney function, the liver function, and your cardiac, because we want to know if the drug is cardiotoxic as well. So if you do have high blood pressure, again, does this drug, and I mention high blood pressure because we have seen that some of the drugs is contraindicated with the myeloma treatment. So we just call the family doctor and they switch the hypertension medication. The endpoint, this is their goal. What are they looking for? And usually it's the overall survival. So from the time you reach CR, or complete remission, and many of our patients do, to the time that you unfortunately go into remission or relapse, relapse or refractory, then that's the time period that they're looking at, how long it takes. This is completely voluntary when you're a clinical trial patient. So if you're tired of seeing me or hearing Dr. Bayless, you can say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go to a standard of care treatment. So I don't have to come to clinic every week or every 4 weeks or whatever. So it's completely voluntary, and you can withdraw at any time. On the other hand, of course, if we find that the pharmaceutical company finds that the drug is not affected, they can stop the clinical trial, and then you would be removed or withdrawn from the trial as well. I think that's happened once when they found that the drug was not effective, so they did stop the trial. And I'm at my last one? Okay. So clinical trials are research studies that test new ways to prevent, detect, treat, or manage cancers or other diseases. And clinical trials provide information about safety and effectiveness of new approaches to see if they should become widely available. Once we finish our trials and we give it to Health Canada, that's a whole new battle. And sometimes Health Canada does come back, and that's what's great about the advocacy groups that speak up for us. And sometimes they come back and say, can you do another year of this trial just so that we can see if it is more effective? We had that done with daratumumab, and there were a lot of patients that were very happy to receive the dara. And then, of course, they tell us when to give it, which is another problem. Okay. And of course, the importance of clinical trials is, well, for us, is to give you opportunities that you would not have otherwise because they're not available in Calgary. And we do have patients that come from Edmonton, from Saskatchewan, from Manitoba, because they don't have these opportunities. This is our team, our doctors, our nurses, and there's a lot of people involved behind the scenes. And of course, there's you. Any questions? Yes.
Is it limited to people that live in the Calgary area? Sorry.
No.
No. That was it.
So the question was, is it limited to patients that live in Calgary? It depends. I can't just say no, because of course, if you live in Calgary, you have a better opportunity to get the medication. We do get, other doctors that email one of our doctors and say, we have a patient that we think is eligible for your trial. It's like, okay, but if you're coming to if the drug, for example, elranatamab is given once a week, and you live in Manitoba, that's long. That's it's very difficult for you to come once a week to get this treatment. Yeah. And the provinces don't always pay for the same thing, so that's the other problem.
The reason I ask, I'm a patient of, or was a patient, maybe I still am, of Peter Duggan, but I live in Lethbridge. So coming back and forth, I'm just wondering, it's more convenient living in Calgary or the major metropolitan area. So I'm just wondering if you are on clinical trials, it's more apparent.
I have other patients from Lethbridge.
Okay, so Lisa, the other patient from
I have
Lethbridge.
many patients from Lethbridge,
okay,
and Red Deer,
so
and Brooks and Hannah, and yeah.
So it
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So
it's. I thought you meant out of province.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
no, of course.
all right.
If your doctor sends a referral, then of course we look at that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know whether you mentioned it, but I just want to know, what is the criteria for a patient to be qualified for a clinical trial?
It depends on which clinical trial. So if you are a newly diagnosed, you would get the newly diagnosed clinical trial. If you are relapsing, then it depends how many lines of treatment you've had before, because it's actually the pharma company that decides the criteria. It's not me. Yeah. Yeah. So it depends what they want, what they call the eligibility, inclusion-exclusion criteria, and we just check the boxes. So if I get a name, for example, and I get permission to look at your file, then I look and to see, okay, you have this, this, and this. But if, let's say your hemoglobin is 78, and the criteria says the hemoglobin has to be 80, well, I'll call the doctor and say, can you get a transfusion? And then next week we'll repeat your blood and see if you at least meet that criteria. And then I send all that information to the pharma company, and ultimately it's them that decide who is eligible or not. And then some of them it's observational. We don't do any medication, we just observe. So we'll do, I think Dr. Tay had one where he wanted to do a PET scan on all the patients to see if it makes a difference in the care, if we do a PET scan on all of our patients, as opposed to just doing it when a patient complains of pain. And so we did that, and we're still doing this. That one was very easy. Everybody got one.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot,
No, that's
but I
okay.
just have another question. Sure. I learned from the US that multiple myeloma is prevalent in the Black American,
Yes.
like African American, which probably translates to Canada, which
Yes.
I'm not sure. But anytime we attend maybe SAM's meeting or something, we are usually very few. Sometimes my husband and myself are usually the only Black person. Now the question is, when you are choosing patients for clinical trials, do you have any representation from the African Canadians in the group?
Here in Canada, it's open to all. We don't look at whether you're, whether it's bio or whether it's someone else. It's the blood part that they're looking at. It's the how many lines of treatment. I do have patients, but you're right. We don't have a huge amount of African Americans in our trials, but we do have them. Yeah.
To that point, and I think to Brian's point as well, is I have a question in terms of self-advocacy. So if I'm maybe living in an area where I'm a little further out, and I'm looking up trials, maybe I'm using the trial finder, and I says, okay, well, I'm willing to travel 300 kilometers to get to trial. This one seems like it could work for me. What do you suggest is the process for someone like me who says, hey, I'm kind of interested in this trial, or maybe we can consider this going forward? What do I do next?
So if you already have a doctor, you would speak to your doctor, and they would refer you to our, it's called the myeloma triage. And then the new patients, there's a list of the doctors that I put down on before, and it just goes down the list. So if you're a new patient, it'll just go down that list. If you live far away, and we do have patients that live far away, we have some housing available. Like we have the, what's it called? Hostel. The hostel that's right across from. Yeah. So we do have some areas where the patients could stay, and actually there's we get emails from families that say, oh, they can stay with us, or they know a place where they can rent really cheap, or if they just pay for somebody to clean it, they can stay in this condo. So we do have places for patients to stay if they don't want to go back and forth, because sometimes we ask them to stay in Calgary for 24 hours just to make sure they don't have some adverse reaction on their way home or the next day, and then the emergency room is like 300 kilometers away. Yeah. So even through SAMS, I get some emails through SAMS as well, asking if they would be eligible for a trial, and then I would contact the doctor to see, because I can't just open your files. I'm not allowed to do that. So I would call and say, can I look at your medical file first to see whether or not you're eligible? Don't come all this way if you're not eligible.
And I guess to Yinka's question is in terms of being a patient and responsibility for asking whether there's trial options available, or or trusting the doctor to sort of choose for me? What kind of recommendations, I guess, would you give to somebody who's wanting to self-advocate for themselves?
Ask all the doctors. And if you don't like the answer, ask another doctor. We have I don't know, we have 7 doctors on our team. And if you don't like what Dr. Bayless says, then ask Dr. I don't know, Tay or Dr. Zapita. Or Dr. Zapita now is concentrating more on amyloid. but yeah, you just ask. And you don't like what I'm saying, ask Rose, ask Nina. There's a whole bunch of us on the team.
Any other questions? Yeah. Sorry, Sophia, I hijacked your mic.
Thank you very much. Well, it's actually not a question. I just wanted to acknowledge and say thank you to all of you on clinical trials. I would have turned away at a 100-page document. Then you find out there every other day I don't leave the bathroom. Thank you, because what you guys do make it better for the rest of us. So thank you so very much.